Welcome to GeeK KetchUp. I'm Kyle Eckert alongside Chris Eck. We're two lifelong friends with a passion for all things geek, whether it's gaming, movies, television, wrestling, comics, whatever. If it's nerdy, there's a good chance we're into it. You are listening to Chapter 5 of Season 1, and since it is the last chapter of 2019, today we're looking back on the year. What was hot, what was not. Chris and I will give you our personal top 10 best ofs from the world of geekery in 2019.
Chapter 5 marks the final episode of 2019 for GeeK KetchUp. It's been an exciting year for Kyle and I as we've launched this new adventure, and we want to start out our closing episode of the year by first sending a huge thank you to everyone who has been listening and supporting us so far.
Yeah, thank you indeed. Couldn't have done it without you. The support that we've gotten from friends, family, strangers on the internet, it's just been absolutely incredible, so thank you so much.
And now on to the reason we are here. We're going to be counting down Kyle and I's top 10, quote, best ofs for 2019. We have each assembled our personal top 10 list of the video games, comics, movies, television, etc. that were released during 2019. And let's be sure to clarify here as well, these are our personal favorites, the things we geeked out on the most over the past 365 days. We are not in any way saying that these are objectively the best things out there. Rather, quite the opposite. These are what we found to be the best, our favorites of the year, if you will, what we found ourselves spending much of our time doing. And of course, we have not played or watched everything that came out in 2019. Think that would be a little bit impossible, but based on what we did experience, these are our top 10s. So Kyle, we've not shared our lists with each other, but let's get started here. What do you have as your number 10 item from the world of geekery?
So my number 10 item is starting off with a little bit of controversy, and I might catch some slack from you on this, but my number 10 item is actually Game of Thrones.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
So I'm not saying it was the best season ever of Game of Thrones. You know, obviously it was a rough season of Game of Thrones.
It was heartbreaking.
It was tough with, writing, character development, overall direction. It was not great. But what I'm really focusing on is the fact that basically from January through May, it is all anyone was talking about, and it felt like it was all I was talking about, whether it was with you or other friends or my girlfriend or coworkers who I barely speak to. Everyone was talking about Game of Thrones. Like, you could not get away from it.
It's very fair. It was the entire firestorm at the beginning of the year. I know myself and a lot of other people were going back and rewatching the entire series leading up to that. There were so many not conspiracy theories. What's the word I'm looking for? Just theories, I guess, in general,
theories,
right?
Yeah,
Fan theories and things like that flying around about what would happen. That is definitely an awesome pick, I guess, to get us started here, but maybe not one I had on my top 10.
Right. No, and I didn't expect it because, let's be clear, the season in itself was a little rough, but the hype train behind it, I mean, it started when the actual teaser dropped in December, and it just set the world on fire. Like, people were getting into this show. I rewatched it. I know that, we had a set, everything else goes by the wayside, and we're going to watch every episode of Game of Thrones leading up to it. And then, as controversial as that season was, it did get nominated for a record-setting 32 Emmys.
Yeah. It's hard to ignore. It was definitely a juggernaut in the world of geekery. It was taking over, fans of fantasy, non-fans of fantasy. A lot of people leading up to season 8 were also getting into it just because they had never watched it before, but the hype was so big. And I think there's definitely a lot to say when anything, whether it's a show, a movie, a game, whatever it may be, a book that can grab the interest of people that aren't even fans, when they're using memes or whatever it may be. So that's a good way to kick us off here.
Yeah. How'd you start your year here? What's number 10 for you?
For me, number 10, I went all the way back to the beginning of the year as well. I have Kingdom Hearts 3 as my number 10 item. It was developed by Square Enix and released on January 25th for PS4 and Xbox. And honestly, kind of looking at that hype train, right? It took 13 years for us to get this game from the time that Kingdom Hearts 2 came out. It was always something that I wanted. Loved playing that game as a kid, and so for me, it had all the nostalgia of when I was playing Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 as a kid. The combat was a ton of fun with crazy visuals, well done special attacks. All the favorites of the Disney universe were there. It did catch some slack from the gaming community because of that, right? Like, oh, it's such
Right.
made for kids, etc. But newsflash, Kingdom Hearts was always made that way, right? So if
Right.
it would have been anything else or more grown up, it wouldn't have really been a Kingdom Hearts game. So
Yeah, it wouldn't have been faithful to the series. And
exactly.
it is a Disney property.
Exactly. But it was really, really well made, like most of stuff from Square is. It was very entertaining. It was a bigger experience than previous versions. It's really hard to take that kind of a layoff with any IP, right, and then
Oh
come
yeah.
back. But I thought that they did a great job with it. I didn't have, much to complain about there. And honestly, with how fluid the combat was, it's got that live action team based combat. And
Sure.
being a Square game, I remember when I was playing this, all I could think about was the Final Fantasy VII remake that's coming because they're gonna
Uh,
adjust the combat and stuff. So I thought it was kind of, or hope, that it was a nice preview of that combat we're gonna see.
yeah, the way
Um,
it's gonna look.
but all in all, I really, really enjoyed it. I was glad it came out finally, and so that was my number 10 to start us off here.
In the end, was it as far as the Kingdom Hearts ranking? Like I know you played 1 and 2 when we were a little younger, but did it bring back all those feels and say like, okay, in the end, Kingdom Hearts 3 is my favorite Kingdom Hearts?
I don't know. I mean, it definitely had the nostalgia factor. I had a lot of the feels. It's really hard to beat an original, right? And I always personally felt that Kingdom Hearts 1 I liked more than Kingdom Hearts 2. I think just because of the magic. It's like when you hear a certain song for the first time and for whatever reason that sticks with you, even though
Sure.
like the band may come out with great stuff afterwards or whatever. I think if I ranked them personally, I'd go Kingdom Hearts 1, then Kingdom Hearts 3, and then Kingdom Hearts 2.
Mm.
But I'm sure that could be debated, on any given day with
Uh,
fans of the series
yeah, on another time, maybe another
and
time.
another time.
Well, we'll move on to number 9 here. Where is your number 9 landing you?
So we're gonna go a little bit off order here. Let's do that. Number 9, I went a totally different direction, and I have John Moxley, the professional wrestler, as number 9.
Okay.
And this was tough. I knew that there was a couple wrestlers that had a great year this year, and I was going back and forth. But I really felt like John Moxley was the most interesting single wrestler in the business. If you look at how he started the year with all the controversy at WWE, he's still Dean Ambrose. Is he going to leave? Is he not? He's in some weird storylines with certain characters, and there's a lot of questions there, but he had kind of he captured, a lot of the wrestling world. Everybody was watching what he was going to do.
There was certainly a lot of buzz.
Exactly. Tons of buzz. But if you really look at it, he had already accomplished pretty much everything there is to do at WWE outside of winning a Universal Championship. So he's held pretty much every other belt. He wasn't happy there, and then he left. Right?
Yeah.
He let his contract expire, and he left. And what was it, like 10 minutes later? He drops probably the best vignette of the year, at least, maybe ever, from a wrestler with the breaking out of the asylum
The,
video he did.
sure.
And that
Yeah.
took over the internet, and that
Well, there's
took
a
over
lot
the
of
wrestling
people were
world.
breaking that down and saying, "Oh, there's the dice in the background, and what does that mean with Double or Nothing?" And there was a
Exactly.
dog, and people were saying the dog was a reference to Roman Reigns.
it,
Oh yeah.
it set things on fire. So twice in the year he had done that, and really it just never stopped. He rebranded himself as John Moxley. He's going toe to toe with some of the biggest names in the business that are outside of WWE, having fantastic matches. He's keeping his name up there, and now he's looking like he's going to go challenge Jericho for the AEW title. So, as much as maybe I wouldn't say he's the best wrestler out there right now or not, but for me in 2019, he was a top guy, top wrestler that I just had to watch to see what he was going to do, where he was going to land up, and then how he was going to make out. And I think there's still a lot to watch as we go into 2020.
No, absolutely. And you say, will he challenge Chris Jericho for that title, or will he join the Inner Circle?
I guess that is still a question we have to find out on upcoming weeks of AEW Dynamite. Good call.
We'll see what happens. No, I don't think he's going to join the Inner Circle. But he's going to continue his rocket ride to the top.
That would be a pretty interesting face to heel turn if he went and just said, "Oh, you know what? I'm not this hardcore. I'm gonna go join the champion and drink bubbly."
Right? Why not? Just a little bit of the bubbly. It would make the Inner Circle pretty intense.
Yeah, they'll just be the new NWO if they keep expanding, though. That's the challenge.
But will we get the Inner Circle Wolfpack?
Ooh, Wolfpack edition, led by Jake Hager.
Right?
All right, well, let's throw it over to you then. What was your number 9 as we keep moving on here?
So I went to the world of comics, and I thought there was a particular villain in the world of comics that stood above the rest, and that is the Batman Who Laughs.
Ooh.
Yeah, the Batman Who Laughs debuted back in 2019, part of Scott Snyder, his run on Dark Knight's Metal. So he did debut a while ago, and he originally came from alternate version of Batman. That's what he is, essentially, is an alternate version of Batman from Earth 22, who becomes the Batman Who Laughs. It's a Batman who kills the Joker, and then a toxin gets released into his bloodstream, and he becomes this crazy hybrid Batman-Joker. And I'll say originally, I wasn't a fan. I thought it was going to be a niche thing. It was going to come and go. But 2019 blew me away with the Batman Who Laughs. It all kicked off. Yeah, it all kicked off with a mini-series that he had, an individual mini-series that started over in January, and then it's just built and built and built. And right now he's in the middle of a story arc where he's got his Sinister Six, where he's taken the same Joker infection toxin that he's put on himself to turn him into the Batman Who Laughs, and he's converting other heroes in the current universe of DC, and he's putting together this like infected set of 6.
But they're heroes.
But they're heroes.
Okay.
It's actually it's people like, a bit of a spoiler here, it's people like Supergirl. So Supergirl has been converted, and Blue Beetle has been converted, Hawkman. So it's these heroes that he's turned into these insane versions of themselves.
Gotcha. Okay.
Where they're essentially evil.
Very interesting.
And he's just, the writing has been on point. The character has been on point. They really gave the character some depth and background to it, and how he went up against another Batman in a one-shot where it's called Grim Knight, where you get to see this pretty badass version of Batman that uses guns and rifles and whatnot.
That's cool. So turning a lot of the Batman rules on its head for this whole arc.
And it really is. And like I said, originally I thought it was just going to be this little niche thing, and it wasn't going to be great. But it's turned into just an incredible character who has just built upon himself and built upon the lore, and is quickly becoming the #1 villain in the DC universe. And in fact, he actually won DC's Villain of the Year. They did a special one-shot with Harley Quinn, who was hosting their version of an award show, giving out like villain awards, and he won. He won Villain of the Year. It was pretty funny.
That's awesome.
But yeah, he's moved on from that Dark Knight's Metal to his own mini-series. He's now the main antagonist in the Batman Superman series that's out right now, and then he's eventually going to square off against Apex Lex, who is another version of Lex Luthor in the Year of the Villain Hell Horizon series that's coming out. Actually, issue #1 came out this week, and it's going to bleed into 2020. So he's just been taking the world by storm, and he's got a great look. Great look with the visor, with the spikes on it.
He just looks evil.
Yeah, and it's all of the intelligence of Batman, but with a Joker twist.
Yep.
So, and just a little tip of the cap to the Funko Pop. The Funko Pop is incredibly detailed and looks amazing. So, my number 9, like, no doubt, like, World of Comics best villain in the world of comics right now is Batman Who Laughs. So he deserved the nod.
That's awesome. I'm glad you brought that up, and I haven't read Batman Who Laughs yet, but I have, the whole first volume here in my list of items to get through, and so I've been super excited. It was a character that immediately grabbed my attention when I first started going around, and so I've been interested. I just hadn't gotten there yet, but the more I've been reading comics over the last few months, it was one of those first books that I literally ordered as like, hey, the things I want to read, that have come out
Yeah.
recently or I've seen people talking about, and so you really have just kind of kicked up my interest level a whole lot more with talking about some of those things that I didn't know as far as how big the character is getting, or how much maybe
Yeah.
longer he's going to stick around in the universe. So
Right.
definitely pumped about that.
No, and like I said, it's just super cool. And from a character that, like I said, you thought he was going to come and go. He was the main villain in Dark Knight's Metal. And you thought, oh, okay, that's really cool version of Batman, Joker mix up, like mash up
Exactly.
there. But they found a way to say like, nah, this character is getting traction and getting more and more popular, and they're turning into a legitimate threat that could stand the test of time as far as DC villains.
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to bump that to the closer to the top of the list.
Yeah.
So let's keep it moving here. What did you have for number 8 then?
So my number 8, when I look back at my video gaming of 2019, there was only 2 games I actually pre-ordered, and there weren't too many games. What I did with my gaming in 2019 is I played a lot of 2018 games. I played Spider-Man. I waited for like the complete edition of Spider-Man to come out. I played God of War the same way. I waited for it all to come out.
Both are amazing.
Both are amazing, but I had to give the nod to Jedi Fallen Order.
Okay, yeah.
To Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and I said it simply because it was the only. I pre-ordered 2 games in 2019, and Jedi Fallen Order was one of them, and it just knocked my socks off. We talked about it a couple episodes ago, where it just is the exact experience of being a Jedi that I wanted,
For sure.
and I thought it was a great addition to the Star Wars universe. I think the argument can be made that it might be the best Star Wars video game ever made. That's a lofty statement. I'm not saying that's what I'm saying, but I'm saying it is in
Creating some
the
fighting words there.
Yeah, I think it's out there. I think it's out there. I mean, I know there's some other classics, the original Battlefronts and Jedi Power Battles, which holds a special place in my heart.
Oh, yeah.
But Jedi Fallen Order, between the story and the mechanics, and the platforming and the dungeon work and building your lightsaber and the customization, it was one of the best video games I've played all year.
I can't argue that. I'll be honest, I did not get Jedi Fallen Order into my top 10. And it
Okay.
was a tough one. I went back and forth on it a lot. I really liked the game. Anybody that listened to Chapter 3 where we talked and broke it down, we were pretty high on the game. It was a ton of fun. It feels a little weird saying, best Star Wars game or not, just because the fact that we only get a Star Wars game, every so often over the last like 20 years. Most people still look back on like Knights of the Old Republic 2 as the best Star Wars game ever.
Right.
I've heard mixed things on Battlefront 2. It seems like they've made that game better and better as it's gone along, but it's a first-person shooter, so it kind of is in a weird spot as far as Star Wars goes for me, because honestly, who really cares about running around with a blaster when things like lightsabers exist? you know, um, but that's I can't really argue with that though, and it was definitely a quality game of this year. It was a slower year for games I felt in
Yeah.
2019. Like there were definitely good games out there, but compared to a couple of the last years, there was no Zelda Breath of the Wild or anything that was just knock your socks off, guaranteed, game of the year I felt for 2019. So JFO is definitely up there.
Yeah. I just, like I said, as it goes down in one of 2 games I pre-ordered, and like instantly day 1 pre-ordered it, take a day off of work, play it. It deserved that. I crushed it in a week. I played it in a couple very long settings, as we did talk about back in Chapter 3. So it did the trick for me, and I really really enjoyed it. So
It was hard to put down once you got going. You know, you wanted
yeah,
to. It had a good pull. You wanted to keep moving forward. You wanted to keep getting stronger, and it rewarded
yeah,
you for the most part with those things. So
yeah,
well
absolutely,
deserved.
absolutely. So what did you have coming in at your number 8 spot?
For number 8 here, I actually had another video game, so we lined up there.
Nice.
It was a game that was released on September 20th of 2019 on the Nintendo Switch, but its history actually goes back all the way to Game Boy, the original Game Boy in 1993. So the item I had here at number 8 was Zelda Link's Awakening, the remake that Nintendo did. And I will say that I have not beaten it yet because my Switch relationship tends to be more when it's I'm lacking things on the consoles or I'm traveling, so I try not to crush those games as much as I do on some of the others. But I could not talk better about this game. It was so well done. It's the original game, the original story, but it's modernized completely with updated graphics, smoother controls, better sound, a new game engine. Loved playing it because it kept those simple mechanics
Okay.
from the original game, right? Because original Game Boy, you had the D-pad, you had B, you had A. That was it,
Yeah.
and you did everything with those buttons. And so on the Switch, it's you have more control, right? You've got some extra buttons. It's still very simple, but I just felt like really more like the hardware mixed with the increased or the newer game engine just made combat smoother. And
Okay.
like I felt like I got hit by the enemies a lot less than I would on the old game just because it was easier to get up, attack, get back, or get up, attack, get your shield out. Things like that just because of the enhancements with the controller and more buttons and things like that. But all in all, I look forward to continuing to play through it. I've gotten through I think the first 2 or 3 dungeons. Got a big chunk of it in when I first grabbed it, and then I'm really just waiting for another trip to come by so I can finish it while sitting in an airport.
Right, right.
you know,
Yes, they just need another long trip to get a good gaming session.
yeah,
Why not?
absolutely.
Why not?
And
That's,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, as someone that did a few Christmas presents this morning, I scored a Nintendo Switch. Shout out to my girlfriend who
Absolutely, quality
dropped
work.
a Nintendo Switch on me this morning. Kind of blew my mind. And I think before we got started here, we were talking about it. Like that could be instantly one of the first 5 games that gets purchased.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
it's so well done. I really feel like the platforming and navigation too was another big aspect that gained a lot from being modernized. Just because like when you're playing some of those old school retro games, especially on old school hardware, like
yeah.
you'll miss that jump like 6 times in a row just because it's a little clunky. I just didn't find that I was encountering those types of challenges playing the remake, and so I couldn't be higher on this game really, except for the fact that I haven't beaten it yet, so I didn't quite move it up in my list. But I would recommend it to everybody that's a Zelda fan.
Nice, nice. And the graphic overtone or over new look. Wow. The graphic new look is spot on. Like it just looks really well done.
Yeah, I mean, it looks cleaner than. I mean, still got. I'd say it's like Nintendo 64 Plus is what it looks like. It looks kind of still like they built it in like a Nintendo 64 type arena, but then it's got that smoothness to it that comes with modern graphics and like the latest and greatest. It definitely looks better than N64. Don't get me wrong, but just kind of that. It's still got that toony look. I guess that's what I'm looking for. Is that Nintendo toony look, but all
Yeah.
modernized.
Like it's in the eyes.
Yeah.
It's all about the eyes of Link when he looks up at you with his big anime puppy dog eyes.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, keeping it going here, I think we're running through them pretty good. What do you have as your number 7 item?
So my number 7 item, I'm going back to the world of television. And it is Stranger Things season 3.
Ooh.
Yeah, it dropped on July 4th this year, and it's another one where it completely captivated my life. Just like I mentioned earlier with Game of Thrones, like when season 3 started to be promoted a year ago, the hype train was on. It was just this like
Immediately. Yep.
eagerness, like I am so ready for some Stranger Things. Um, And as soon as it dropped, it was like, okay, we need to get to season 3. And what we'd actually done was crush seasons 1 and 2 in a weekend, preparing for season 3. So Stranger Things 3, season 3, just I thought it kind of knocked out of the park. It returned to form. In season 2, they got a little bigger. The monsters got a little bigger,
True.
and the world got a little bigger in season 3. But it took it back to that friendship's root.
Yep.
And I just thought, like, all the glow ups of all the characters, they aged them properly. They started to put them in high school, which I thought was great. They mixed in some love stories, and this show just continues to give you that 80s nostalgia feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a sucker for that. I'm just a sucker for 80s nostalgia.
It's a great like buddy story, and I thought they did a good job with uh, bringing in very appropriate types of conflicts between the characters. You know, as they all are changing, some of them are still hanging on to the old school stuff that they used to do when they were even younger, and then
Yeah.
obviously you have the introduction of girls and all that kind of stuff, which every teenage boy knows what that is like. You know, you're inseparable from your party, from your friends, and then girls come in, and it's just throws a wrench in everything.
Yeah.
I have to admit, though, you say Stranger Things, I completely skipped out on that with my considerations, you know, and I blame it on binge watching, right? Because it's a
Yeah.
double-edged sword with binge watching. You know, you can immediately get in, watch it all, get it all in one spot, and it's a ton of fun. But on the other side, I find a lot of times it's easier to forget that you got to see, you know, certain shows, or you may forget all the details that happen because you kind of lock in on the big things since you watched, you know, 8 to 12 episodes in a very short period of time.
Right.
I'm admittedly a little disappointed in myself because I really do love Stranger Things, and I probably should have had that as a consideration. So good thing that you got it in here for us. But
Yeah.
you know the Steve and everything they did with some of the side characters to really elevate them, I thought was good.
Yeah.
And beginning to end, the season was really well done.
No, I thought so. Yeah, they not just the core 4 of the party, their stories advanced, but yeah, the way they addressed Steve and Nancy, and those stories as well. It's like kind of Nancy getting a job
Yep.
and they tackled some social issues as well,
Yep.
as far as becoming a reporter in a man's world, like things like that. So I thought they really took it next level and stepped everyone up,
Yeah.
across
Exactly.
across the board, even when it was Hopper, and get the heartbreaker of Hopper at the end of the season, but they left it on a nice cliffhanger to
Yep.
be able to come back with season 4, and we'll find out what happens.
Yeah, I'll be
So,
interested because they kind of closed up some of the storylines that they had been building over the first couple of seasons in season 3.
right,
But you know, we are getting another season at least, right? Or maybe another couple seasons. I think they announced. So
at least one more.
yeah, I
At
think it was
least
at
one
least
more.
one more. So it'll be interesting to really see where they go. You know, from this point, if they do try to set up some new threat or some new, you know, monster. How many monsters can one place have, right, in a small town like Hawkins? But I think there's some questions there to see the longevity of it. But either way, it's been television gold since they launched that
Uh,
show.
Oh, I think so. And I actually have a little note here that it's interesting that it debuted right on the heels of Game of Thrones ending. So Game of Thrones may have let a few people down, but then as soon as Stranger Things came out, it just lifted their
It
spirits right
saved
back
us.
up. It saved us. Yeah, it saved us. So, well, I've got some television marked in there. Where are you at with 7?
Number 7, I actually went movies, and it's the only movie that I made on the list, and that is Avengers Endgame. You know,
Okay.
it was another situation like Game of Thrones that, you know, we had a long build up, you know, 8 to 10 years of build up, numerous movies, and then you know on April 26th of the year, Marvel and Disney dropped the culmination of that entire story arc, and there's a lot riding on the line for this between you know the characters and Marvel themselves, right? You know, how do you close up something that has been so epic for so long? You know, a lot of TV shows struggle to do that.
Sure.
A lot of game series struggle to stay that relevant and that quality over that period of time. But in all honesty, Avengers Endgame was masterful. I thought very few real issues with it. It's one of the most successful movies in history, right? It made so
Yeah.
much freaking money.
It's so much fun.
But and even looking at it as a superhero film, that movie was just a good movie. It had great emotion, even better action, tons of good payoff scenes that were things that have been built in the different movies over the years. A lot of fan service there without being, I think, over pandering or duplicative of previous things. They kept things going that we'd seen in previous movies, but almost in a different way. And I really
Right.
appreciated that. It wasn't just, hey, let's go refilm this scene. Like, they actually gave us different views into scenes we had already seen before, right? When they go back in time and you got Tony and them and Ant-Man with the other Captain America and other versions of themselves with
Yeah.
the Tesseract. So I really appreciated that. But of course, I'm a huge Thanos guy, and he got plenty of screen time, tons of due, and I'll never not appreciate that just because so few villains get that level of respect. So this movie just had it all. I won't go on and on. Most people have seen it, but I think it's something I'll repeatedly watch over the years. Hopefully I'll have a kid that I can watch through the whole universe with, and they'll feel the same way. I think it'll stand the test of time. But anyways, so for number 7, I had Avengers Endgame.
No, and I think that's very fitting because it was just a financial, as you said, it's a financial and critical success as far as it's the highest grossing movie of all time, and it did a lot of really good fan service. Rotten Tomatoes scores are through the roof, and Fandango scores are through the roof. Like, everybody seemed to like it, and it can be difficult to put a nice little bow on 10 years and 20 some odd movies, and they capped it off really nicely. I'll say you talked about Thanos. I was really impressed with, because in the opening scenes of that movie, they kind of off Thanos,
Right.
but they find like an intelligent way to bring him back and almost make him more threatening.
Yep.
He's somehow more intimidating without the gauntlet and his double-sided sword. It was just really well done, and as you said, like, taking you back and doing a little bit of fan service of reminding you of some of your favorite scenes from previous movies. I laugh a little bit. I can't help but think about Ant-Man being like, as far as I'm concerned, that's America's ass. On how Steve Rogers' suit is not too flattering to his body.
Yeah.
And they kind of poke fun at themselves a little bit because it was a little campy, a little comic booky in those early years, and they've really fleshed it out and made it more realistic, which I do enjoy. But
they set the bar, and I think that's kind of one of the other things that really seals the deal in this movie, was that it set the bar so high for what a cinematic universe can be, how it should be done, and really how it can be, taken all the way from beginning to end of a story arc. So nobody's really going to be able to follow it, I feel. Maybe even Marvel themselves won't be able to truly follow and do so well, but I think the bar is set. They're showing that they've got a good handle on things, and so moving forward, I'll probably still just continue to trust Marvel more than almost any other filmmaker at this time. In as far as if I'm gonna pay money to go to a movie in theaters. So yeah.
No, I agree. The bar is high, and it's done well. I have a feeling we may be talking about Endgame again. But before we move on with our list, let's take a quick break because we downloaded some royalty-free holiday music, and we want to use it.
So, Kyle, have you been naughty or nice this year?
Cheer or fear, how is your year? I have been very admirable, thank you, Belschnickel. So I put together a quick little Christmas list that I want from Santa. 3 big-ticket items for me this year, and one is the X-Men Red Volume 2 trade. So this follows up, it's Volume 2, Waging Peace. It's written by Tom Taylor, and I read the very first trade of X-Men Red right before House and Powers of X and 10 came out this year, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. The Volume 1 is called The Hate Machine, so if I can make a recommendation on a volume of X-Men prior to House of X, Powers of 10, I would say X-Men Red Volume 1, The Hate Machine. So the Volume 1 crushed it, so I really want to read the follow-up of Volume 2. The other few items here is I asked for a Sega Genesis Mini to finish out my classics. I have all of the classics, including the dreaded PlayStation Classic. So I think it only makes sense that I ask for a Sega Genesis Mini, so I can have my NES Classic, my SNES Classic, my PlayStation Classic, and, of course, my Sega Genesis Mini or Classic. And then the last one is, in my household, we've fallen in love with board, table, and card games. So one of the key games that we play in the house is Boss Monster, which is a card game by Brotherwise Games, where you are the monster of a dungeon, and different heroes come to town, and you have to build out your dungeon to defend against these heroes. And there is a sci-fi expansion pack called Crash Landing. So I've asked for the Crash Landing expansion pack, so I can take my current fantasy set of monsters and dungeons and turn it into a fantasy sci-fi set of monsters and dungeons.
So coming back here, we've already covered number 10 through 7. We're going to jump in here for number 6 and keep our list going. So Kyle, what did you have at number 6 of your best of 2019?
So, Chris, you already mentioned a member of this faction, and number 6 for me is All Elite Wrestling, which I know is pretty vague, but All Elite Wrestling, which really got founded in January, literally on January 1st of 2019, has just taken the wrestling world by storm. And I say that in a sense where they have changed the face of the business, because finally the Goliath has someone to match them and to make them change their ways, which is the key to wrestling, because for a long time it was solely WWE. And when it was solely WWE, that was the only place you could go for really good wrestling. And with the debut of All Elite Wrestling and hosting their pay-per-views and now their weekly Wednesday night show Dynamite, they have just knocked it out of the park. They have a great men's division. They have a great tag division. They're building a great women's division. It still has some, time to get there and ways that it could grow. But All Elite Wrestling has been absolutely fantastic this year.
Yeah, I can't argue with that at all. Probably a preview of what's to come. I may or may not have it on my list later on. But entirely accurate. AEW has come on the scene. It's been hot out the gate. It's stayed hot. They are competing head to head with NXT on Wednesday nights, and going back and forth. I've seen the ratings, and they're not winning every ratings battle, but we've got the makings of an initial true showdown between them over the next probably couple years. And everybody in the locker room just seems to be giving 110% to it.
Absolutely. And no, they might not be winning the ratings battle week to week with NXT, but what you're watching happening is, like, week by week, it's ticking up. And it's approaching. It's not quite there, but there's almost 2 million people on the Nielsen ratings. There's almost. They're both at, like, give or take 750,000 each, though.
Yeah.
So that means there's almost 2 million people watching wrestling on Wednesday nights, like, which is insane. And
I wonder how that compares to Raw and SmackDown.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely the hottest night on wrestling in my house now. We always watched Raw and SmackDown, and it's been on different nights, but now no matter what happens the rest of the week, Wednesday we've got one of those programs on at minimum.
Yeah, and it's causing AEW is causing NXT to step up their game. NXT is causing AEW to step up their game. Both are causing the main roster of WWE and SmackDown and Raw rosters to step up their game. So I think the introduction of AEW, Cody Rhodes and the Jacksons and Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega, all with the money being backed by the Khan family, it is just taken the world by storm and absolutely incredible. I saw you're already starting to see AEW things bleed over into other areas where, like, TNT is currently airing a commercial previewing AEW for Christmas Day basketball games. So
Wow.
Like, that's huge. Like, Christmas Day
Yeah.
basketball games have been a staple for a really long time. And so now that crowd is about to get exposure to
Yep.
AEW. And I think that is something to note, that AEW is seen as a success in the eyes of
Already.
TNT already. Like, they see this, okay, this is a moneymaker. Like, no, it's not doing millions and millions of fans, and it's not pulling in like Attitude Era type ratings yet, but you got to build from somewhere.
I mean, around 1 million viewers a week for something that is barely 3 months old, I think is definitely a success. And we were talking off mic, a little bit about this past week's Wednesday, and I was really surprised. But this is a perfect example of the ripple effects that have come out of what AEW is doing. Is that we're kind of starting to see a shift where things aren't so predictable on the WWE shows.
Yeah.
WWE for the last couple of years, with the exception of, one here and there, maybe a year or something, every title fight was on a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
There was very few title fights and even less title changes on a Raw or a SmackDown, cable television.
Absolutely.
But this past week, I was watching AEW, didn't get to catch NXT, and then I wake up Thursday morning to find out that Rhea Ripley had beaten Shayna Baszler for the NXT Women's title,
Yeah.
which is a pretty big freaking deal because Shayna Baszler had been dominating for what, a year or over a year down
approaching
there.
Asuka's record maybe.
Right. And so that's huge, and like, that is a direct result of them trying to pull people in away from AEW on that same time slot. So the only winner is the fans. We've said that going back to when we covered AEW in chapter 2, but the absolute winner is pro wrestling fans across the board. So absolutely deserves a spot here on the top 10.
100%, 100%. So with that, what falls at your number 6?
So number 6 here was where I started to get really tight on where I was going to number some of these things and fit them in. I will also say that number 6 was a late change.
Oh.
So and we may talk about that a little bit later, because I originally had this as number 5
Oh.
and bumped it. So I've got The Mandalorian at number 6.
Okay.
And as everybody knows, because Baby Yoda's taken over the world, The Mandalorian was brought to us alongside the launch of Disney Plus on November 12th. And this show just burst onto the scene and never looked back. It's taken over the internet with maybe some of the best supporting, I'll say this is Baby Yoda may be the best supporting actor or actress of all time. Like,
it is true. It's true.
They've just absolutely taken over the world. But this show out the gate has had great action, solid mystery. Every episode has been pretty fun. I think there was one or two right there in the middle as they did some character building that slowed down a little bit, but that made sense. And it's got a freaking straight up adorable 50-year-old baby.
No. 100%. It's funny that you say you had it at number 5, because now I'm a little disappointed because we would have actually had the exact same number 5.
Oh, okay.
Because I also have The Mandalorian. My Mandalorian is at number 5. You're right. Like, Baby Yoda, and at one point on my list, Baby Yoda has his own spot. Like, the child, we call him Baby Yoda, but the child had its own spot on my list because I was like, the child has been incredible. The Mandalorian. So let's speak to the Mandalorian real quick. You're nailed it. Like, crushed it there. That is exactly what the Mandalorian has been. There's been great plot twists, great mystery, great character development. Episode 7 just came out this past week, and they brought back a ton of characters that they introduced in the first 6 episodes, which was...
Yeah, they did a good job circling back.
Oh, it's an incredible... when we talked about it a while back, it gives me that sci-fi space western, which I love sci-fi, I love space, and I love westerns. So The Mandalorian checks all those boxes for me. But what has really made the child stand out to me is the fact that I have people that I know have zero interest in Star Wars showing me and sending me Baby Yoda memes. Like,
Oh yeah,
like
he's so
it's
adorable.
so
How do you
adorable.
not?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. So, you know, the people that love Star Wars are all over the child. The people that could care less about Star Wars are all over the child. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he's everywhere.
He's the cutest freaking thing that we've seen in a long time. And all in all, I really felt like The Mandalorian was a breath of fresh air to me for the Star Wars universe. I've kind of got a rocky situation or relationship with Star Wars right now. I've been a lifelong fan, so don't take me wrong at all. I am a lifelong fan of Star Wars, but the last couple of movies just didn't quite nail it for me. But this show brought it right back. Getting to see a real glimpse into a race of characters that we've just barely seen addressed in the mainstream movies has been refreshing. We're getting more information. We're getting to see a look into the Mandalorian guilds. And Jon Favreau has done all of it masterfully. He continues to prove he's one of the best, writers, directors, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
him. He's because he does everything right. He acts, he
Showrunner.
directs.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a showrunner.
He's a showrunner.
He's just one of Hollywood's best, and so give him more Star Wars material to work with. Give us more Mandalorian, and I thought it had a pretty good spot. Like I said, I did bump it for a late entry into the competition here, but I really enjoyed it.
No, and it deserves all accolades. I mean, and that's why for me it was a top fiver. Like I felt like the five spot became significant to me because it is like a top five. It's the same way they feel a top 10 or a top five, top three are significant numbers when you're doing lists. So it felt for me that it's gonna be my highest rated television show.
That's
For
fair.
me, that like this year, like I said, I enjoyed the hype between for Game of Thrones. I enjoyed the hype for Stranger Things, but The Mandalorian is the only show for me, or the only piece of one of the few pieces of content where Friday mornings I'm turning the episode on while I'm getting ready for work.
There's a lot to say there because almost everybody I know that's watching this show, Fridays they are getting it in. And it is only a 30-minute show, so it does make it easy to do that compared to some of the longer shows. But it's been a while where I've seen any piece of television where numerous people that I know of are like, yep, I watch this and I watch it on the day it comes out and
Yep.
I'm looking forward to it all week. But it totally deserves it.
Now, I've got a buddy at work who asked me. I guess it was the other day. He was like, it was 9:30 in the morning, and he was like, "Did you watch Mandalorian yet?" And unfortunately, that day I wasn't able to watch it before work. And I was like, "Dude, it's 9:30 in the morning." He was just like, he was like, "I woke up early. I woke up early today to get it in." And I like, okay, like it's taking the world by storm. It's making people get up early for work so they can get a half-hour show in.
I may be guilty of that a little bit. Though I work from home, so for me, to throw it on before I really get going in the day early on, it's not as hard. But I definitely feel like I did that a few times.
Yeah, but it speaks to what the show is and how well it's been made and
Exactly.
the stories that it's telling. That it makes you want to know the second that you have an opportunity to watch it and get more of the story and get more Mando and get more Child. That you want to put
That
it on.
Bayo.
Yeah, that Bayo, that Bayo, that Baby Yoda, that Bayo. I'm really interested to see where season 2 of The Mandalorian takes us.
Completely agreed.
Like, and that's just like, I think we talked about it in the past where I'm like bitter that there's only 8 episodes, and that it's ending, but like,
Well, because this whole season has been entirely character development.
yeah,
We're seeing some different things, and there's been things that have happened, but you can tell that there's going to be more seasons because this entire season has been solely character development and kind of jump starting things. And that's how a lot of season ones are, but other ones you may see like more of a villain come in or something like that where there's a bigger focus for that season.
right.
I don't think we've quite seen that here so much as we seeing where the Empire is right now, what the people that are trying to live on these different planets, to get by now that there's a new republic in the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just laying all that groundwork, but it's done it so well and so interestingly that I'm with you. If they were to put out season 2 tomorrow, I'm in.
Yeah,
You know?
in right away, in right away. Yeah, And they have so many places they could go because, like you said, it's been all character development. So we still have a lot of world building around. Like, yeah, we're familiar with the Star Wars universe and this and that, but it's a period of time that hasn't really been addressed. Maybe outside of a couple comic books, or maybe there's a few legends stories out there that address this time period between episode 6 and episode 7. So there's a lot to build on, and there's a lot to see, and I think the show can only get better. And one of the
I
biggest
agree.
mysteries: when is Pedro Pascal going to take the helmet off? The dude is too.
Will he
Will he
ever take
ever?
the
Because
helmet
the
off?
dude is too good looking to wear that helmet forever, right?
He rocks the mustache better than most
Yeah,
people.
yeah. Like I'm just saying, like objectively speaking, that dude is a good looking. That's a good looking fella. And how are you gonna cast an actor that with those kind of looks and have him wear a helmet the whole time? Like I think that's just an interesting aspect to the character.
It is true, and like the challenges it brings to him for being interesting when he's delivering lines when you can't see facial expressions or anything like
Yeah.
that. It is interesting. We will have to see it. It would be funny if they went the whole show and like the very last episode they drop it out and here's here's his face, but we will have to see.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Have to see. So that was my number 5. As we skipped from your number 6 to my number 5, they were both The Mandalorian. What is your number 5?
So, my number 5, like I originally had it as a Mandalorian. Like I said, I bumped it this morning because just yesterday, Netflix released The Witcher.
Yeah.
And I have to be completely honest that as much as I am a fan of the games from CD Projekt Red, there's been 3 critically acclaimed games around this character and this IP. I've read a few of the novels and short stories he's a Polish author. I think it's Andrzej Sapkowski. So I've been a fan of this for a long time. And even with that said, I had some not concerns, maybe question marks about this show going in. I expected it to be pretty good. Netflix does a good job on most of their things. There's a great backstory, back catalog of information to pull. But when I started watching this yesterday, I could not stop. From the pilot to the end, it's 8 episodes, hour-long episodes. I could not stop. I thought it was extremely true to the source material. I thought Henry Cavill was amazing. I thought the whole cast did great. There was some of the best character development. I mean, right on par with what we were talking about with The Mandalorian goes on in this season. The story is strong. It's well told.
Nice.
It pulled from things that I'm aware of from the books and the games, and then probably added in some other stuff that I'm not aware of, but it all worked well. Um, Honestly, the action, music, scenery, all of those things are pretty on par with something like Game of Thrones. So if you're into fantasy, you like awesome action, definitely plug on The Witcher and check it out because I think it'll be right up your alley. I watched all 8 episodes before we started filming here.
Nice.
I watched 6 of them yesterday, and I woke up early this morning and watched the last 2 this morning just to make sure before I threw it on this list. But I don't do it service here just to get it on here because it's hot and new. I seriously thought that I could have probably put this as one of my top television shows on any list, and I cannot wait now for another season.
That's pretty remarkable. I mean, to be able to crush 8 episodes because they're about an hour, right?
They are an
They're
hour.
about an
Yep.
hour in 2 days. Like, and I don't take that lightly as someone that I know is can be a little hard on television shows. Like to get that recommendation is pretty remarkable.
I haven't binge watched a show like that in a long while. Something new,
Yeah.
especially. I don't think that season 1 had a single bad episode in it. I think that it just got better as it went. Really, what it came down to, splitting hairs between this at 5 versus Mandalorian at 5, was those two slow episodes in the middle of Mandalorian where I felt like I still enjoyed them, but they kind of dialed back from what we had seen.
Yeah.
In The Witcher, it pretty much just keeps moving forward. Every episode's got great action, great special effects, great story, continuation. So if there was 15 episodes, I'd still be watching it right now.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't stop, and I absolutely think that they hit it out of the park. I think it was better than I even expected. I think most people are going to feel very similar. Um, but I'll just have to wait until everybody gets to check it
I,
out, and then we can actually dive into
I'd
it.
say the rest of us will have to catch up. I mean, I know that it had a lot of critical acclaim. Like before it came out, they were saying that the fight scenes and the action scenes were on par with Game of Thrones. And when you really look at what Game of Thrones did over the course of their 8 seasons, it's like, wow, that's quite a statement. So it's awesome to hear that it did stand up. And I was interested that Henry Cavill uh, took on the role. I mean,
For sure.
he's a big time actor. He was Superman, for God's sakes. So, like,
Right?
he's a big time actor. And for him to, I don't want to say dip down and do a Netflix series, because I think Netflix has proven as a studio that they are the real deal, big time. But for him to sign on to a project like this and feel committed and feel passionate about it, it speaks volumes to it as well.
It's definitely a bold move for any actor, because he'd been making a name for himself in movies, obviously Superman, and then some other things he had done. But just with the source material, right? It's
Right.
not something that most people are familiar with. It kind of has a if you think back when Game of Thrones first came out, it was the same way. Very few people knew what Game of Thrones were
Right.
at the time. But it, Geralt is a very interesting character that has a kind of mute personality. Witchers don't have feelings. That's one of their things. So you think about any actor trying to take that and then, how am I going to get over and be captivating and amazing when like I can only show so much emotion or whatever it may
Yeah.
be. But he nailed it. I really felt like I was watching Geralt of Rivia, just like when I was playing, the games. It's exactly what I pictured in every iteration that I've seen of that character, and really as good as he did, every cast member I actually thought was spot on. I don't think there was anybody I hated. The main characters, Yennefer and the Bard, and some of them that you see throughout all the stories in the games and into this were spot on.
Yeah.
Renditions of them as well. So definitely recommend everybody get on The Witcher while you're over your holiday break. If you got time off, you won't be disappointed.
Yeah. Solid recommendation. Solid recommendation.
So we got to keep it moving here. Kyle, let's take it in. We're almost down into the top 3, but we got to get through 4 first. So what did you have at number 4?
My number 4 was the House of X, Powers of 10, Jonathan Hickman X-Men story that debuted in September and ran throughout and then lended itself to the Dawn of X era that we are now in Marvel Comics. This was arguably the one of the best comic books I read all year. It was the best series. I think from issue 1, I was just praising it up and down. I completely reset the universe as far as X-Men go. I recommended it to literally every person I know, whether they read comic books or don't read comic books. If they're familiar with the X-Men, I was like, you need to find a way to read this comic book. It was just so well done. The art was bright and inspiring. The story had twists.
Totally agree.
It was 2 different companion stories being told simultaneously, with House of X being a 6-issue mini and coming out and then on every other week, and then on the other weeks every other week the Powers of 10 6-issue miniseries was coming out as well that told a future of this. It was just an incredible, like, time bending, mind bending, just reinvigoration of the X-Men who had really fallen by the wayside in the past 10 years. Just brought them back into the spotlight of Marvel, where I think they deserve to be, because I love mutants. So, House of X, Powers of 10 blew my mind. I feel like I was talking about it every week. I was sending pictures of it every week. I pretty much forced you to read it. I forced everyone I know to read it.
It's all true. It's all true.
Like, it's just so good. So good.
It was solid. It was solid. I really enjoyed it. I may hold some of my commentary for a later moment because I may or may not have it on my list a little bit later. But totally agree. It was a good kickoff to get the X-Men going again, and I enjoyed it enough that I read it twice in a 2-week time frame.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it totally flipped the script on its head as far as Xavier taking a whole new mentality to how his approach with humanity, and then establishing this new island country of Krakoa, which is the mutant nation, and developing the flowers and the pharmaceuticals, There's just a lot of really good commentary to it. X-Men are known in their history to have a little bit of social commentary to their comic books, just because they lend themselves to that. So I thought it did a great job of that, and the political scene of starting up a new country, while also expanding on current X-Men lore and bringing them back. So, you know, we'll touch on it again. I'm sure it sounds like here, but number 4 for me, House of X, Powers of 10, just both miniseries put together, knocked it out of the park for me.
Solid event.
Where were you at with your number 4?
So with number 4, I take it back to the world of gaming, and this is one that I kind of went back and forth on because I feel like if there's anything on my list that could bring me a little bit of feedback, it might be this one. But I went with Fortnite Chapter 2.
Okay.
And really, the Fortnite is just the relationship I can't get away from. You know, it came out originally back in 2017, took over the world, had more than 50 million daily players, including myself. I've put hundreds of hours into playing both Battle Royale and Save the World. But for after all that time, especially at the beginning of this year, I had kind of burnt out of it, right? It was getting a little stale for me. They were into like the 10th season of the first chapter, and so there were things like mech warriors running around that kind of unbalanced the gameplay. It kind of just had hit that stall out for me.
Sure.
And then in October of this year, and this is why it counts for a 2019 item, is because in October, Epic Games did something that we have not really seen before in video games, and they executed this insane in-game event where, missiles were flying around and the pretty much blew up the whole map, sucked everything we knew it, including ourselves, into a black hole, and literally shut the game down for 2 days and left millions of people just watching a black screen, right?
Yeah.
It was a crazy viral marketing event that they did. And I was one of them. Like, I was totally sucked in. I definitely sat there for a couple hours with the screen on, just waiting to see what would happen. And it got my attention. And admittedly, the new map that they came out with and some of the things they reset on to bring us back to where the game kind of first was, as more like core combat and building, it just sucked me back in. And since then, I've been playing regularly each week. Much more time than I thought I would spend playing Fortnite again. I kind of thought it was on the end of my list, right? That I wasn't going to play it much anymore, and I'm playing it, regularly, hitting my daily challenges. Like level 175 in season 1 of chapter 2.
Wow.
And it might keep my interest for another couple years if they keep doing things like this. So I really, as much as I kind of didn't want to put Fortnite on my list here, I felt like I had to.
It's acknowledging that you wanted to peel away from the game, and it just drew you back in. I mean, like again, I've said this a few times.
Exactly.
It speaks volumes to something like that. Like, you want to quit it. It's that girlfriend you just want to quit and you just can't. But like, that's pretty incredible.
Exactly.
And I'll say to the black hole thing, I take a lot of stock in when people that don't follow something or don't play something find themselves talking to me about it. I take a lot of stock in that. So once again, when I have people that I know don't play Fortnite talking to me about this, like, have you seen this black hole thing? Like, what's that all about?
Right.
And they're asking me, knowing I'm a gamer, I'm like, that's really interesting. That means it's broken outside of its normal realm.
Exactly.
And that's what pop culture is. I mean, that's how things get huge and get massive. Is so for them to do that, to stay strong, and it's been incredibly impressive what Fortnite has been able to accomplish in their lifespan as far as staying relevant and making these changes. And I think this is just one more proof of innovation that they've brought to the video gaming world.
It's true. They have found a way continuously to stay pretty close, if not at the top of one of the most competitive industries in the world.
Yeah.
You think about how fast gamers move. There's new games coming out every day. Everything is competing for your attention. So every game competes with each other, even if they're not in the same genre.
Sure.
and Fortnite. I think it was Gears 5 that came out earlier this year, and I remember IGN broke this headline that said it was the first time in since Fortnite had come out that a game on Xbox had been more played or more downloaded, one of the two, than Fortnite since Fortnite launched. So like that's how strong they've had this grip on the industry,
Yeah.
and they do things like this, and it's impossible to get away from them.
And now it's impressive. It's impressive, and hats off to them.
All right, well, just before we get to our top three, Kyle, we're going to take another selfish break to spread holiday cheer through the use of royalty free Christmas music. Ho, ho, ho! Ho, ho, ho!
Chris, we found out that I made the nice list and got all my presents. How about you? Did you make the nice list or the naughty list? And what do you want?
Well, I've probably been naughtier than I think, but all in all, I hope I've been pretty nice and been putting good karma out into the world. But admittedly, as far as the Christmas list goes this year, I was a little bit more on the responsible side given that we've kicked off the podcast. So the primary things I asked for were a USB microphone that I can use on the go. Who knows, maybe for some interviews coming in 2020. As well as a 500 gigabyte solid state external hard drive because, these files for these podcasts are a little bit larger than you think. So I definitely need some space to make sure that I can store all this awesome audio that we've been pushing out. But honestly, I'd be totally lying if I said I didn't actually want the new Lego version of the 1989 Batmobile. I mean, the Michael Keaton one from the original Tim Burton Batman. Yeah, if my wife is listening and there's still enough time, I really hope you can hook me up with that. Because who doesn't want more Legos? And then ultimately, I kind of rounded off my list with something I'm really hoping I get a few more of, which is the East of West trades off my Amazon list. I read the first one recently and absolutely loved it. I've been really itching to dive into the rest, so I went in and immediately threw on, volumes 2 through 9 on my Amazon list, just hoping somebody would get them for me in time for Christmas. So, if my wife's out there listening, mom, dad, whoever, those are the things you can hook me up with under the tree this year.
And we are back. Time to get down to the nitty gritty. Our top 3 best ofs of 2019. Let's just dig right into this bad boy. Top 3, number 3. Where you at?
So top 3, I'm gonna bring up an item we were just talking about. We were pretty close. It's kind of been interesting as we've gone through here to see how different we've been in certain areas, and then once we started getting here into this top 5, top 6, we've started to tighten up a little bit. You had it at number 4. I've got it at number 3. It was the House of X Powers of 10 event.
Nice.
Can't really rehash everything that you said. There's probably no need, but it came out, ran from July of this year through October. Jonathan Hickman is just absolutely an amazing storyteller. And for me, the reason why this really was so high is because it really has pulled me back into the world of reading comics. It revitalized the X-Men, which was great for me as a lifelong X-Men fan. It was a great kind of kickoff point for me to jump in, have some good content to read, get back in the swing on comics, get back in the excitement for the X-Men. And since then, I've been reading comics every week, got weekly trades coming to me and picking up stuff left and right. So I really had to give it its due. I read it twice in 2 weeks when I did finally get to it and just couldn't get enough, couldn't put them down. As you said a little bit ago, the points where they bring in some of the politics and some real big kind of character shifts from things that we've seen in the norm for certain characters like Xavier in the past, or even Magneto, whoever, Apocalypse, all kind of taking some different roles really intrigued me, and so I've been totally into it. It's got me on the Dawn of X, so X-Men 1 in that series, and then Excalibur following that. I check my mailbox literally like every day, hoping that a new issue has come in, and it's all been because of the catalyst that this dual series was. So I couldn't have been higher on this as far as the world of comics goes this
Yeah.
year.
It's it's really awesome that it sparked, I'm always happy to hear about new comic readers, people dipping into the medium, because I think sometimes it gets a rough stigma that it's for kids or for this or that. And so it's really awesome to hear that this recommendation and this series and this event has triggered you to reading more comics and to really exploring the medium. And I know that we just heard that East of West is on your Christmas list, which
Oh
is
yeah.
another incredible Jonathan Hickman book. So anything to expand your readership and to go deeper into the world of comics is a absolute plus.
Yeah, I mean Hickman is high on my list right now. I've been kind of checking out different things that he's done. I would probably be interested to read almost anything he's done, but you brought up East of West. If that had released in 2019, I probably would say that that would have been my top book because now that I've read it, that story has got my full attention.
Sure.
It's different. It's non-superhero, which I told you, when I was kind of getting back into things. I love superheroes, and I'm gonna be following a lot of superhero comics. But I I knew that once I started breaking that mold and getting into the world of non-superhero comics, that was
Mhm.
probably gonna take me to the next level. And things like East of West have done that. But as far as the top list here, I really had to go with the House of X Powers of 10.
Sure. Sure.
So what did you have at number 3?
Coming in at my number 3 is it's the highest video game on my list here. And when I was originally putting my list together, I figured like this one is without a doubt the most personal of all personal entries. Because the game may have debuted in 2008, but it was the summer update of the Frontier Pursuits summer update to Red Dead Online
Okay.
that I have just fallen in love with. So, with this Frontier Pursuit summer update, Red Dead Online introduced new specialty roles into the world of Red Dead Online. You can become a bounty hunter, a collector, or a trader. And then, most recently, in the past 2 weeks, they've debuted Moonshiner. And what it
Oh, getting that booze on.
getting that booze on, getting that booze on. And what it's done is I felt like it's taken all of the successful things from story mode of Red Dead and started to transition them into Red Dead Online because
Finally.
you finally really and that's honestly that's how it feels because when Red Dead came out, Red Dead Online was pretty empty. It was pretty barren. There wasn't anything to do. But now that they kept putting out little updates, little updates, little updates, and then finally in the summer they dropped the big one, and it pretty much like tripled the amount of stranger missions that are out there. They added new story missions that are out there for you to do, which is really essential because it gives you a purpose to go play
Sure.
Red Dead Online. Because if not, like you're just going and maybe you're picking up your daily challenges. But as I know that we actually had a moment where you and I were playing Red Dead Online, and
Yep.
you once said to me, "Why am I doing this? Like,
Pretty much.
what is the purpose of what we're doing? Because it doesn't upgrade the things that we were doing in the beginning. They weren't upgrading you. They weren't giving you
Exactly.
stronger weapons. They weren't giving you new cosmetics. Like, it was
You,
just one of those things."
yeah, it really was tough for me because when Red Dead first came out, the story was amazing. I was so sucked in. I don't even know how many hours I played in it. I was all in.
Yeah.
And it had a good progression, a good feel, as you upgrade it. And then they launched online and you had to reset yourself, and then there was really
Yeah.
like nothing that you could even get to. Like I went from having all this sweet clothing and these completely customized guns and all this stuff that I'd worked so hard for in story mode. And then I go over here to online where I really want to be playing with everybody and I've gotten nothing.
Yeah.
And it just killed my entire sense of spirit for the game, really. It was just like, okay, well, I don't know if I'm going to go put another 60 hours just to get those basic things I've already earned. And I get why they did it in the separation. It makes total sense in a story driven game. Kind of give your own character over here. But I was glad to hear and see that they've been continuing to support it. We expected that out of Rockstar. The moments when we've played, you and I, the gameplay online now with some of these additions is
Yeah.
getting better, but I do think they still have a few hurdles to overcome. But glad to hear that it is getting closer to the story level of content to do. They keep bringing in like new professions and stuff. I know you've really enjoyed the trading and like
Yeah.
hunting, trapping part of it. So I kind of leave that in the background as something I hope will suck me back in the way like a Fortnite has.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I've personally seen it yet.
For me, part of it is, as I've talked about with the Mandalorian, like I love Western era things. Like I'm a sucker for westerns, uh, and so I was a sucker for Red Dead, and this really like it just immerses you into that time period. And I've spent so much of my time hunting and trading and building up my store, and I know part of it is a bit of my imagination, like that I'm hunting and getting meat and pelts and giving it to Crips, and Crips is turning it, and then I got to make a sales run into town, and so like there's some imagination factor into that I'm really running a store here, but it's been so much fun to me, and over when I look back over the year, the Red Dead Online experience, and then especially when they drop the Frontier Pursuits, it's the one constant. Like it's the one video game that never got deleted from my hard drive.
That's
It was
awesome.
always there. I still have the Red Dead theme on. I get the when I got Jedi Fallen Order, that theme went up for a little bit, but it quickly transitioned back to the Red Dead theme for my PlayStation. So it's held my attention. I was so happy when the Moonshiners drop came. I immediately logged in and got that up and running to see what it was all about. I'm really interested to spend the next couple days over the holiday break here of to try that out a little bit and get a little deeper into it. But yeah,
When
the
I thought
Frontier
the
Pursuits.
classes. I thought when they introduced the classes that was also a big win for them. You know, just to immediately set yourself apart, give you some different things. I know it seemed like you could ultimately kind of earn most everything with any of them, so it wasn't like as crucial, as far as which one you picked over the others. But at the same time, I thought that was one of those things that was missing when it first launched.
Yeah,
Of okay, I want to build my character into this bounty hunter and focus on those things, or I want to build my character into a trader and focus on those things. Like you need some of that in a game that is that big. Otherwise, you just find yourself like I do most of the time, where I literally just run around and I just shoot everybody just because
just
it's funny.
rampage. Yeah, just rampage. No, you're right, and you got to give them purpose, and I guess that's what I'm coming back to is like it's given the online experience purpose to build to whether you want to get the specific belt buckle for traders or the specific gun holster that comes with bounty hunters or outfits and things like that. And for me, it's been the traveling cart and the hunting cart and things like that. So
Yep.
for me, I'll ramble along forever about Red Dead Online. So I'll cut myself off here, and we'll take a look at next up on the list here for you.
Well, before we do, I'm just gonna go ahead and give a quick shout out to our buddy Nick. Hey Nick, we talked Red Dead.
It happened. It happened.
Love you, buddy. All right, so I think that brings us up to number 2 here, and honestly, I will admittedly say that I had a lot of TV on my list this year, and number 2 is another television show, but I think it goes back to what I said a while back about I think that it was more of a little bit of a down year for games and a really big year for television this year. So my number 2 I have is Watchmen from HBO.
Okay.
It,
Okay.
th- this show debuted back in October, on October 20th. It reintroduced us to the world and characters developed by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons for DC Comics in the 1980s, and start to finish. I absolutely love the show. It just did its finale last week, and not a single episode disappoints. It's a great alternate universe type story, or alternate history, really is probably the better way to put it, type story. And those things fit right into my wheelhouse so much. I love anything that gives me alternate history, just as a big fan of history in general.
Sure.
But you get the top tier HBO production. Trent Reznor does the music for the show, so it's just spot on music right behind everything that's going on. The tone, the tempo, the characters, all fantastic. The casting, fantastic. I know multiple people that have been watching this show, And what kicked it up, I probably would have put it at number 2 regardless, just because I am very high on this show after the first season. But what really kind of solidified it was that I didn't talk to anybody that watched this show that didn't say that they thought it was the best show of the year.
Oh wow.
Like
Okay.
to me, that feedback was kind of locked it in. But I am sold on it. I hope that they bring us more. It was one of those ones that every Sunday night, the next Monday, it was top thing I had to do was to watch this show, and the, man, it just had good mystery, good reveals, crazy events that happen.
Hmm.
It's not specifically tied into the original movie from years
Right.
back, so you can kind of start fresh with it, even if you're not a big Watchmen fan or had even seen the movie. You don't have to.
Yeah.
So I could go on for this one and talk about Watchmen for a while, but you get Louis Gossett Jr.'s in it. Chappie from Iron Eagle is
Yeah.
freaking in the show, and I love Louis Gossett Jr., so that probably did it enough for me, anyways.
Yeah.
But
Well, I know that it was seen more as a sequel to the Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons book than it was a follow up to the Zack Snyder movie.
exactly,
Like it's gonna stick more to that universe and not go with the changes that Zack Snyder chose to make.
yeah.
So
You got some other good side characters. Don Johnson is in the show. Who
nice.
doesn't love Don Johnson? But either way, I just found it interesting. I always thought that world, even back to when the movie came out, was a cool look and had interesting characters. They were different, right? They're very
Yeah.
different
Yeah, it's different.
from typical superhero stuff. And so I think some of that, like with the boys, right, on Amazon, it had that same appeal with the
Yeah.
boys being superhero trends that you're used to, but then also told in a very different packaging. Makes fun of some of the typical things we see in superheroes. So it just kind of gave it a fresh break from all of the Iron Mans and Supermans and all that kind of stuff that we get so much of these days.
No, I'm with you, and it's superheroes without being superheroes.
Exactly.
Because not
Exactly.
everyone's flying and heat vision and stuff like that. Like it's a little more grounded, and some of the characters are a little more grounded.
That is a good point. As easy as it is to get lost in somebody like a Doctor Manhattan, this giant blue guy walking around. Like a lot of the characters are more everyday people that are just going and becoming heroes or some
Yeah.
version of a vigilante. So, all in all, I know that there's some questions about whether or not we'll get a season 2 or if season 2 does happen, what that'll look like. But I personally all in for season 2 plus plus plus.
Yeah.
If HBO will keep doing it.
Nice.
What about you?
For me,
What'd you have for 2?
it's funny that you mentioned The Boys. And I'm not going to say it was The Boys, but for me, it's a little abstract, is that it's independent comic books.
Okay.
So I've been a comic reader for close to 10 years now. And for a long time, I've stuck to the big two, DC Comics and Marvel Comics and those superhero genres. And I've dabbled in some other areas, but for 2019 was really one of those years that I felt like was a great time for independent, and to some extension, this could go to video games and this could go to other areas where like independent publishers just really started to flex their muscles and independent creators started to do it outside the realm of the big corporations or the
For
big
sure.
publishers. And so for independent comics, like I just Die was a big one for me.
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
Oblivion song was amazing. And then when we really looked at the TV show side of this, saw like The Boys, Umbrella Academy, Deadly Class on Sci-Fi, The Walking Dead on AMC. There's a Bloodshot movie coming out with Vin Diesel soon. These are all based off independent comic books, whether it's from Image or IDW or Boom Studios. And so it's these independent publishers and these independent comics that just have taken my comic reading to the next level. We talked about it earlier when we looked at Jonathan Hickman stuff, where we wanted to start branching out outside of the superhero genre. And the independent comics is where I have found this niche for myself, and I just really, really have been enjoying it.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome, and I appreciate your outside the box thinking here and bringing that up because there have been some great ones. you brought up Die, and I'll throw that on there. It was really hard for me not to put Die on this list of top 10. If there was anything that was probably like a number 11, it
Yeah.
was that comic, in at least the volume one of that comic that I got to read, and it really, that and like East of West and some of these that I've started to look at outside of Marvel and DC have started to open my brain to what comics can be and how they can tell stories. So I don't know if I could disagree with you. I'm kind of jealous that I didn't think of something so thoughtful.
No, and it felt like honestly, what the reason it happened the way it happened is I was trying to narrow it down to one of these, whether it was Something Is Killing the Children or Middle West or Seven to Eternity, which are all of these independent comic books that I read. I was trying to pick one exactly, and I just couldn't. I was like, I can't narrow it down to just one of them because for me, it's this new thing to be so deep into the independent scene. And it's really, when I look back on my year of comic reading, that has been the overarching theme is that I've finally started to like take recommendations and branch out and find these alternate these alternate stories and these alternate publishers and just see what they're doing and coming to find out that just because it doesn't have the $1 million backing of Marvel or DC doesn't mean that it's not a good story or not like really quality art. So,
For sure. I
uh,
think for me, one of the things that has been I'm finding a lot of love in with the non superhero books, and a lot of them being from like Image and Dark Horse and the different companies you're talking about, was that after I read the Game of Thrones books, and this has been years, this is how big of a deal this is for me. I used to read a whole lot. And then I read the Game of Thrones books and absolutely loved them. But since I finished those, and it's been years since I finished those, there's been this void in my life as far as finding something, especially in the fiction realm, that can pull me in that much. George R. R. Martin, whatever people want to say, is one of the best, most descriptive writers I've ever seen.
yeah.
And so as somebody who likes to read but has had that issue and only been able to find a book here or there, these books, these non-superhero comics, I feel are already starting to finally fill that void. It's making me want to read more. It's
Sure.
giving me the things I was craving, even though they're not in a 500-page novel, format. But that's finally been one of the chunks that's been helpful for me is let me get back into the reading, and I'm doing it in this medium versus where I was before, which was always like a novel.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I think independent comics. If I could make any recommendations, it would be any of the ones that I listed there. Oblivion Song by Robert Kirkman. Walking Dead ended this year with 193. He started up Oblivion Song about a year ago, so I think his series Oblivion Song has been truly amazing. Die by Kieran Gillen. That's just been incredible. Maybe comic of the year. Undiscovered Country by Scott Snyder, who had an absolutely amazing run on Batman back in the Court of Owls era. He has a new comic coming out. It's already out. First two issues are out. Undiscovered Country. That one's incredible. So start to look at if you're into comic books and you haven't branched out of the Marvel DC publishers, I highly recommend taking a look at some of these independents, picking them up, and seeing what's what. You will not be disappointed.
Definitely don't think anybody would be disappointed. But speaking of disappointment, we've gotten all the way through our list except for our number ones of 2019. And before we reveal those, we kind of wanted to touch upon what we thought was the worst of for 2019. And I think Kyle and I agree that
We agree.
that the worst thing from the world of geekery that we experienced in 2019 was the epic failure from BioWare and Electronic Arts. Came out back in February, and that was Anthem.
Yeah, it was rough. Rough. I think saying it was rough might be putting it politely. It was a dumpster fire of just
Disappointment.
baby diapers. It was
Baby
awful.
diapers.
It was dumb. It was baby just shit filled diapers on fire, in a dumpster.
It was so
Like,
heartbreaking. There was so much hype for this game, right? And a lot of promise. You know, going back to when they first debuted it at E3 a couple years ago, like everybody was hyped for this game and what it could be.
yeah.
What do you mean I could be an Iron Man type, warrior flying around, killing everything? Oh, and I can do it in groups of 4 with my buddies? Sure, sign me up.
Yeah.
And then what they launched, I mean, and let me be fair, it was fairly interesting. It was good to look at, right? And the combat
Yeah.
was decent. You know, there was some positives there.
Flying in the mech was
Flying
awesome.
around in the mech in the worlds was
Flying in the mech
fantastic.
was
Yeah, so
awesome.
they had
Yeah.
some things that they were on the right track with, but that's really where it ended. I mean, there was
Yeah.
so little content in this game at launch. There was so many bugs in the game at launch that the whole experience was really just ruined. Like it was slow
Yeah, it
when
was
you're
awful.
moving through the central city to get missions and things like that. Crashes were so frequent. The loot system was terrible. And then every
Oh
time they
god.
tried to fix the loot system, it got
It made it
worse.
worse. Yeah. It somehow got worse with each patch. Like it doesn't seem like logical that a team of developers would make a patch, put it out there, and the game would somehow get
Well, and you could
worse.
tell that they were scrambling. And as somebody that works in technology industry, like I used to say this when it was happening, was that they weren't testing it. Like you could tell that
Yeah.
they were, and if they were, they weren't doing it extensively enough to make sure that things were working, weren't causing other issues. There was no regression testing, in my opinion, because everything that they would launch would break something else or change the mechanics to something that everybody hated. I don't. It was just a complete shitstorm from the get go. And to cap it all off, really, I think the thing that stuck with us the most, left the biggest, bad taste in our mouths, was the fact that the Bioware executives were so freaking smug and arrogant and borderline resentful to the community for pointing out that they had shipped and charged people for such a shit game.
Yeah. I remember there was a distinct moment where I was on my lunch break and I was at home because I walk to work and I walk home from my lunch break and I was watching a live stream with the
Yeah,
executives
they would do those dev live
and
streams. Yep.
those dev live streams, and I was watching it on lunch, and it was sitting here, and I'm like, are these guys actually speaking to us as a gamer community this
Right.
way? Like, they're not acknowledging. I think, yeah, we like to make the joke they were basically being like, hey, it's a bad game for us too,
Yeah, that's what
guys.
it
It's a bad
was.
game for us too.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, Ben Irving, you made this
Yeah,
game.
when Ben Irving made that statement and was just like, "Oh, I feel your pain because it sucks when we play it too." I'm like, "You're the fucking creator. Like, you don't get to say that, Like, we all paid money for this game and got
Yeah,
nothing out of it. And I go back and forth on whether or not I'll ever give this game another shot. There's been headlines about it. Oh, EA is going to put all this money and resources and make it what it's supposed to be or what they wanted it to be. It's probably going to be too little, too late in my
yeah,
books. But unfortunately, it was kind of an easy pick for worst of. I
yeah.
do have to mention I had a second item here, and I think it's a little funny because you had it on your list. You started off our episode here talking about Game of Thrones season 8, and I actually had that as a worst of.
Yeah.
For me, and I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, one of the biggest Game of Thrones fans in our circle of friends, and I had so much hype and belief in the final season of this show. But after an okay start in the first few episodes, they just DB Weiss and David Benoff completely screwed over every Game of Thrones fan after that. Um,
Yeah.
they pretty much threw it away like a kid who got tired of his toy. They went try to close it up, package it up, get it done super quick when the whole show had never been based on that. Really did not line up with what the fans had come to expect from either the books or the show. And
Right.
and it really just kind of put a black stain on what was supposed to be one of the greatest, pieces of television or shows on television that we had seen in years and years. And,
Yeah.
you know, they went running off to Netflix, or not Netflix. First it was Star Wars, right? They went running
Star
off to
Wars. Yeah.
Lucasfilms. and then that got canceled because they went running off to Netflix. So in my opinion, I'm kind of done with those guys. But I was looking at this and I had to throw it in there that personally I think I still have post traumatic stress from it. But it just they completely crashed and burned it, and it went off on a note that it shouldn't have done. It should have been much better in the end, I feel.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you there. I when I had it on my list, I kind of chuckled to myself as you write it down and you went through my list, and I thought this is an odd thing because might be the only thing that can be on a best of and worst of list. Like it somehow simultaneously qualifies as both being having a really good year and a really really bad
It's
year.
true.
Like
It started so strong, and then just those last, and really specifically, it was the last three episodes. Because I thought it
yeah.
was fine, and then it was those last three episodes where they tried to completely shift Danny's character, and just force what should have been its own season almost. That whole
Yeah.
transition could have been its own like ninth season, and it was just wham bam, thank you ma'am, and they kind of just left it and said, whatever, screw you guys, that's what you get. And it
Taking our ball
they
and going
took the
home.
ball and went home, and it was really really a big bummer for me. I'm glad that all these other shows came out to really kind of save television for this year, because I remember back when the show ended, I was hot, and I was
Oh
not
yeah.
happy at all, about what had happened. So it just felt disrespectful to R. R. Martin, like, because to me, D.B. Weiss and David Benoff made their freaking name off of R. R. Martin. The first couple of seasons are literally pulled out of the book. They didn't create it. They didn't come
Yeah.
up with it. They copied it, and they did it well. But to see that then just nosedive and then pretty much throw it in the trash, because they wanted to go on to other things, to me was really really disrespectful. So anyways, I'll leave it at that. But
Let's say we'll probably come back to Game of Thrones at some point in the future of GeeK KetchUp, and just
maybe
we'll
we'll
go
go
off.
off on it then. But for today, let's get wrapped up. I know we've been on a long one here. We are at our number ones of 2019, our favorite things of the year. So let's start with you, Kyle. What was it that was your number one for 2019?
So I have a feeling that both your number one and my number one will have been addressed in the other person's list at some point, and I know for a fact this one did on your list. It is Marvel's Endgame.
Ah,
My,
okay.
my number one thing on the year, absolutely Marvel Endgame. It is 10 years, 21 films in the making. I said it earlier, it is very, very difficult to take 10 years and 20 some odd films and put a nice bow on it and make you feel good about it. But they really did. And I thought they did every character justice, gave them the appropriate amount of screen
For
time,
sure.
which is pretty incredible considering the amount of heroes and the amount of
There's like
actors
60
and
people in that film.
60p. Yeah, it's insane. Like every single what the Marvel Studios has built, and they built up towards Endgame, and then to give you that payoff, like it just well done, absolutely incredible. Highest grossing movie of all time, highest opening weekend. It was the fastest cumulative records to basically from 500 million all the way to 2.5 billion.
Wow.
It got there the fastest, and all the markers in between.
I didn't know that. I knew it got up there, but I didn't realize that it also hit the speed records.
Speed records as
That's
well. So,
awesome.
and I think it deserves all of that. I know that Martin Scorsese is going to make his comments about Marvel movies and this and that, but let's be clear. Like I said, 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, 8.5 on IMDb, 90% on Fandango. Was a financial success. It was a critical success. It was the second movie I watched other than Lion King when I first got Disney Plus. And Lion King just happened because of time. It was just spot on, perfect. Like instantly becomes a top 3 Marvel movie for me. Which once again, that when that includes 20 plus films, it's really something.
I totally agree.
So for me, it was Marvel.
I
Endgame.
totally agree, and I can totally respect it at number one. It was a big year, And honestly, a lot of these putting them in as far as numbering was like splitting hairs, because it was
Oh,
a good year
right.
for a lot of these items. Um, so I couldn't argue with that. I really love the film as we talked about earlier. I will definitely be watching it again as years to come, and they did do everybody justice. I think that might have been one thing we didn't touch on earlier, but I really do agree with you that they did every character,
Yeah,
justice and got them
every
some screen
every
time.
character.
I just didn't leave you really wanting much when you got done with that film. Like there wasn't anything that really walked out going, I wish they would have done this or I wish they would have shown us that. And I think it showed because when they came back with like the second cut or the extra deleted scenes, like it was all so silly and basic. Nobody really cared. Um,
Yeah, this is just trivial scenes that didn't matter.
exactly. So good
Yeah,
stuff.
I yeah, absolutely. So, what is your number one?
Well, true to your prediction, it is another item that we had already talked about. And when I look back on 2019, as far as all of these different industries go, different IPs go, I went with AEW as my number one of 2019, and slightly more specifically, the tag team division. I kind of had them as co number ones, but
Yeah,
not to rehash everything, but of course it came onto the scene this year, and ever since October 2nd, when the first AEW Dynamite debuted, it has been must-watch television week in, week out. It really overall, it was just like a shot of energy as a wrestling fan. Because really over the last few months, especially the post-Mania rut that happens, everybody kind of gets hyped at the beginning, and then the summer
yeah,
happens. I was really just watching. I'm a fan and I watch every week, but I was mostly just watching the WWE programming there for a while just to keep up with the storylines, to know
yeah,
generally what was going on, so that way I could watch all the pay-per-views and the whole 9 yards. But ever since AEW's come on, I have to watch every Wednesday at a minimum, and
yeah,
I still catch most of the other shows, but like I find myself actually sitting, stopping, watching, focused on what is going on with AEW and ultimately NXT and all of that. So it just kind of kicked all of my fandom back up to where it typically was and has been in previous years. And then specifically the tag team division, right? They have really been what set AEW apart for me, just because they've put so much focus on it. There's so much talent there. They open almost every Dynamite show with a tag team match that is damn near match of the night.
yeah.
And
It's definitely a barn burner out the
right, I
gate.
mean, huge spots, tons of excitement, um, and like so that's kind of really goes to the thing is that between the Young Bucks, the Lucha Brothers, SCU, Private Party, Proud and Powerful, Best Friends. I mean, go on and on and on with how deep their tag team division is, but I feel like because I know that they typically wrestle at the beginning of the show, I have to jump in and have to
Yeah,
watch at the beginning of the show because I know that that's going to be one of the most exciting things that happens all night. And between the amount that it's been able to suck me in, but also how much I care, how much more I care about tag team wrestling right now than I had for a
yeah,
long time. I know you've always been a tag team wrestling guy. I always liked it, but it was not my top tier. And I feel like the
yeah.
AEW division has really helped make it to where I almost care more about the tag teams right now than I have or I do of the singles wrestlers. So
Well, I feel like they filled a void. They saw what other products were doing and where other products were focusing, and I think it's no secret that for a long, long time, WWE has proven that they could care less about tag teams,
it's an
in
afterthought.
one way or another.
Yep.
It's definitely an afterthought. The way they treat the tag teams, or change the belts over quickly, or even where they put them on the show, or in most cases on the pre-show, not on the show. I think AEW saw that and filled that void and said there are tag team wrestling fans out there, or let us show people what tag team wrestling can be, and then just delivering and giving it to them. So it's knocked out of the park. There's no argument here. AEW was on my list as well. Um, so to have it as your number one, like, yeah, boom, like, absolutely. There was, like I said, numbering. We're splitting hairs when it comes down to where exactly these things fall, and I felt like I wasn't. For me, I haven't been able to catch every single AEW Dynamite, which is why it's not number one. But if if life had worked out differently, I would be
Sure.
watching
Yep.
every single episode, and it would be number one. So
That's fair.
no argument out of me.
That's fair. All right, well, that does it here. Final episode of 2019 is in the books. Those are the top 10s from Kyle and I. We would love to hear what everybody out there had as their top 10s of the year. If you agree with us, if you disagree, definitely hit us up on social media, and we will be back at you first thing in January of 2020. Thank you for listening to GeeK KetchUp. If you enjoyed today's chapter, please remember to subscribe to GeeK KetchUp on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Check out GeeK KetchUp on Facebook and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @GeeK KetchUp Pod for updates on new episodes every 2 weeks. Stay saucy.